Hey fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. Hope you're watching on SIFTD. If not, you're watching on YouTube. And would appreciate a follow on Twitter at Michael Pachter. If you are watching for free, you don't have to follow me, but come on, I'm so much more interesting than Selena Gomez. So our first question from SIFTD from Rewind Replay. Why would Nintendo continue to support the Nintendo 3DS as opposed to pushing all of its resources to Switch development? Wouldn't it make more sense for it to go all out on its new platform to ensure its success? That is a brilliant question. I think that is something they're going to probably do over time. So what we've seen with the 3DS is, sales probably peaked in the high teens, millions per year. The DS peaked at 32 million per year, and averaged like 25 for about 5 years. And then sales started to decline, coincident with popularity of iPhones and tablets and stuff. And so I think that, as 3DS sales have declined, we're looking at like 7 million this fiscal year and maybe 6 next year. I think that the Switch starts to cut into handheld sales. And the truth is the Switch is just a better handheld than the 3DS. So I totally get that. I don't think they'll abandon it because they have an installed base of something like 100 million or whatever of 3DS. So they're not going to just give up on the 3DS. They're going to keep supporting it. But I agree with you. I think resources shift more and more to Switch. And I think they'll make more money on Switch. I mean, the cost of the components, probably $200, $220 for the Switch. That's going to come down to $100 pretty quickly. So they probably will ultimately make more money. They definitely make more on games. And if they can get download right, they'll make a lot more on games. And it is a better experience. So I agree. Going all out on the new platform makes sense. But Nintendo's profitable and they have a ton of cash in the bank. So it shouldn't be an either or. I could see them spending less resources on 3DS because it's a declining platform and more resources on Switch as it ramps up. So I think you're directionally right. That's probably what they're going to do. Our next question from SIFTD from Shellburn. With Switch off to a great start and Scorpio right around the corner, will Sony drop the price of PS4 Pro this year? If so, how big of a price drop do you think it will be? Well, the last question is easy, $50. Sony will never cut more than 50 at a time. The only time I can remember them ever cutting the price of any of their consoles by more than $50 in one fell swoop was May of 2002 when they gave the Xbox a big old FU and they took the PlayStation from $299 to $199 5 months after the Xbox launched. Like, FU, try selling it now. And that was pretty brilliant because Xbox didn't sell very well. So other than that one time, $100, I mean, I'm sure they went from 600 to 500 on the PlayStation 3 as well, but that was a giant drop. No, I think PS4 Pro goes from 400 to 350. I think that happens probably a month at least before Scorpio launches. Possibly they'll do it at E3. So if Scorpio gets announced, and let's just pretend Scorpio was $400, I could see Sony the next day at their press conference saying, oh, by the way, PS4 Pro is $350 now. So I think they will do that. They have the luxury of doing that. Microsoft's going to probably announce Scorpio pricing on Sunday, June 11th. Sony's press conference is on Monday, June 12th. So Sony's going to have 28 hours to react, and it wouldn't shock me at all. Sony guys are pretty good at exploiting an opportunity, and Microsoft's going to give them an opportunity, so we'll see. Our next question from SIFTD from Dr. Mono. As a former IP business law attorney, I'm curious about your approach to due diligence when a client approaches you about potentially investing in new gaming IP. No client has ever approached me about investing in new gaming IP. So when I was a lawyer, none of my clients ever had anything to do with games. And since I've been a lawyer, which has been over 20 years since I practiced law, people have asked me what I think about it, but I've never had anybody other than mobile games ask me about it. I did, in fact, in my current job, advise some poor guy who was asked to he was wealthy, so I should, not a poor wealthy guy, some poor guy who was offered a chance to invest $10 million, and his $10 million is going to buy him 5% ownership in a company that never put a game out. The company was called Machine Zone. So this poor guy owns 5% of Game of War and Mobile Strike for $10 million. And I would bet he's making $100 million a year off of his $10 million investment for the last couple of years. I may be off by 50%, but he's making a lot. He's making a lot. So I remember, it's actually a guy who was at the time, he's no longer on the board at Wedbush. So I was asked by the CEO of Wedbush to help this board member out, and the board member's like, I don't know these Machine Zone guys. So he gave me the deck, that they were giving investors when they were raising private funds, and they're impressive. I mean, the guys are good, So I was like, look, I don't know if they even know how to make a mobile game, which clearly they do, but who knew? And I said, but they're pretty accomplished game makers. I mean, they all had great resumes. They're all real people that I'd heard of. And it had laid out their approach and what kind of game they were going to make and what they're going to use the money for and how they're going to position and market. And this was just Game of War. They hadn't yet come up with the idea for Mobile Strike, or they hadn't started it. But this guy owns 5% of the company. So he was really wealthy before, but he's even more wealthy now. So due diligence, it's impossible. If it's new IP, how do you know? I mean, and we answered a prior question in another episode on this, but there isn't a lot of new gaming IP, so it's really hard to make a bet on anything new. It's just hard. You never know. And I can't remember a new IP that's been a giant hit since Assassin's Creed. I mean, maybe Watch Dogs, but the second one wasn't that great. So it's really hard to pull off. And you need the resources of Ubisoft to kind of pull that off. So, no, I don't get those questions, though. So there is no way you can do due diligence on new IP. You just can't. Our last question from SIFTD comes from Kidaz. How does licensing in video games work when another brand is involved, such as the NBA or Disney? Does Nintendo need to pay licensing fees again when it includes old games like NBA Jam on its NES or SNES classic micro consoles? Yeah, the NBA has a license. They can't be paid, period. I'm sorry, they can't. No game can be published that has the NBA name or contains the likeness of any player without the Player Association or the organization, the NBA, getting paid. And so, yes, they were paid. I actually heard some speculation that one of the reasons that the NES, stopped production was because there were licensing issues with some of the third-party games. So I don't know if that's it, but yes, they have to be paid. I don't know how you come up with that. You have to go back to the NBA and negotiate, unless initially the rights were negotiated and the NBA accepted, 5% of revenue or whatever. But if you're buying 30 games, they get 1/30 of 5%. Like, who knows? So these are complicated things that lawyers are supposed to figure out. But the answer is absolutely, the licensor gets paid again if a licensee decides to republish the game and makes a profit on it. So brands never get screwed, ever. And if you rip off the brand and don't pay them, they get something called an injunction, and they get your console from ever being sold, and they make you recall it. So you got to pay them. So nobody can put branded IP on any console without paying the licensor. We'll be back next week on the Pachter Factor. We appreciate you joining us. If you're watching on SIFTD, thank you. If you're watching on YouTube, at a minimum, the price of watching me for free is put up with my crap on Twitter, and at least check out at Michael Pachter. If you don't want to follow me, I'll tough it out. I'll cry myself to sleep tonight. Thanks for joining us.